Laura, I don't know if this showed up when you logged in, but you may want to make an announcement that this is being recorded. So that will be one, helpful for documenting the open house, but also helpful for taking minutes later. So.
Okay, super. Let's just go ahead and get going. Hopefully Jeff will show up quickly. So for the members of the public, I'm Laura Morrissey. I'm the Parks and Recreation Chair for the City of Covington. I'm gonna call this meeting to order and get us started. We're gonna go through the attendance for Parks and Rec members. So I see Amy, I see Jenny, Steve, Robert, and then we're missing Jeff, who said he would be here. So hopefully he will join us shortly. Parks and Rec members, you have seen the agenda. Unless there are any objections or any changes, we will consider the agenda approved as written. Any comments on that? Oh, there it is. Great. Okay. And also the minutes came to you as well from our last meeting. So Parks and Rec members, unless there are any objections to the minutes, we will also consider those approved as written. Any comments on those? Robert, is your hand up there? No? Okay. It's just, oh, it's just my cursor. Sorry. Okay, great. Members of the public, we always have a public comment period in our meeting. If you are here to comment on the Prose Plan, then I would just request that you go ahead and save those comments till after Mr. Beckwith has done his presentation. But if there's anything else Parks and Rec related that you would like to share with the Parks Commission, this is a great time for you to share your thoughts or your opinions or anything else that's not Prose Plan related. And I believe you would just raise your hand and then Ethan can go ahead and acknowledge you. Correct, Ethan?
Yes, that will work.
Okay.
I'm not seeing any hands being raised.
Okay, that's fine. Before we move on, I just want to let members of the public know that this is a recorded webinar. And I also want to let members of the public know that we do have one vacancy on our Parks Commission. So if you are interested in things Parks and Rec for the City of Covington, this is an opportunity for you to get involved if you would like to. There's no qualifications to be a member of this commission. If you have ever set foot in a park, walked on a trail, and you live in Covington or within a 3-mile radius and you just care about improving the city, you are qualified. So if that interests you, Ethan, I know can help, but you can also look on the Covington website and there's a commission application and information there. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Ethan and Tom Beckwith with Beckwith Consulting, and we can get this open house started.
Yeah, I'll just introduce this agenda item real quick. This is really an open house to share with the public and the commission on the work that's done so far for updating the city's parks, recreation, and open space plan. This is an important plan for the city to not only map out kind of long-term goals for the city, but it also functions to make us eligible for grant funding from the state as well. So kind of kills two important birds with one stone and is an important activity to update regularly. We do it about every 6 years. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tom Beckwith and Ferduiz doing functioning as our consultants and helping us with this activity. So I will let you take it from here, Tom.
Okay. You got to share me.
I think I made you co-host, but let's see. You should be co-host.
It only says only host so far.
Yeah. Can you share your screen?
There we go. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
By the way, there's a full consulting team that has worked on this plan so far, and Ferduiz and I are the only ones that are visible today, but that doesn't mean that the other participants don't have a big hand in what we're going to show you. So First off, we took a look at what your population projections are. And through 2050, we expect that you're going to grow about 35,000 people. That's from about 21,000 now. So that's about 14,000 more people. In the bottom right-hand corner, though, as important as the numbers are what kind of people are going to live here by age group. The blue bars show what you were in 2010. The red bars show what we expect you will be in 2050. You can see that we still have a preponderance of families, adults in the middle-aged families, and still lots of kids. But the senior population, those over 64, is starting to grow, and that will have impacts on what some of the recreation demands and interests are. We projected your recreation activity volumes through the year 2050. The blue bars are what you were in 2020. The red bars are what we expect your volumes will be in 2050. To project these, we use the diary-based surveys that the State Recreation Conservation Office has been doing for about the last 12 to 18 years, and put those against your age compositions that I just showed you. So the arrows show you where the biggest volumes are: swimming indoors, weight conditioning, aerobics, playgrounds, bike riding on roads and streets, hiking on urban trails, walking on park trails, walking with a pet on leash in a park, but the biggest one, of course, is observing wildlife. Now, part of these volumes are depending on the participation rate, meaning what % of the population engages in this activity, and then the number of times that you engage in it. And you can see that where the red bars are is where there's a high % of the population that does these things. It does them frequently enough to begin to generate some real volumes. That doesn't mean that those smaller bars up at the top, which are the traditional athletics, aren't important, but compared in volume, they're lesser than, say, the ones we just talked about. This is your inventory. These are existing public parks. It includes your 12 parks. Sometimes you call them open spaces, but they're still parks as far as types of improvements and the activities you do within them. And there are 2 Kent parks that are right on your borders, which we found that your residents do use. And there are 2 King County parks right on your borders, which you also found that a good slice of your residents also use. These are the existing schools. Kent, and the very top, number 9, is the Tahoma School District. These are existing homeowner association parks. There are 18 shown on this map, but we've since inventoried 32 parks plus 22 more open spaces. We call them parks because they either have a picnic facility or they have a playground or a sport court, which are considered kind of neighborhood park assets. Now, HOA parks are only usable by the residents that live within them, not by the general public. But they do decrease the demand, if you want, for public parks because those residents get to use their facilities. And you'll see that has an impact on walkability. We mapped how long it takes to go 5-minute walk from a park or a school, and that's what the yellow areas show. The white areas are areas where are outside that 5-minute walk boundary. And you can see that's true in some of the older neighborhoods in kind of the center of the city, also up in the very far northeast, and then the neighborhoods in and around the proposed future Lake Point development area. So one of the objectives is to provide parks within those areas for public use. Now, one implication of this map, of course, is it assumes that you can walk to an HOA park, which not a non-HOA resident can't. On the other hand, if we were just to show you the walkabilities to public parks, we'd be underestimating the availability of HOA parks to residents. So that's one of the challenges of this plan, is to balance those 2 competing objectives. Now I'm going to show you the citywide plan elements. This is the list of them. We'll go through them fairly quickly. These are the conservation strategies. These are our objectives. Consolidate all the city parks and all the inventory, yours, adjacent cities, the county, and HOA, to create creek corridors through Covington. Conserve the riparian habitat within them. That's a key objective. Include private properties that are already conserving habitat as a result of your critical areas ordinance. and remove invasive species, planting native vegetation, stocking creeks, and so on. These are the corridors we focused on. They're shown in green as they follow the creeks in and through the city, primarily within your city limits, although in some cases the origins and the extensions of these creeks go beyond. So we're looking not just at the Big Sioux Creek corridor, but Little Sioux, Jenkins, the north stem of the Jenkins, and Cranmore Creek corridors. So the objective here is to consolidate at least a concept within those corridors to enhance and maintain those native habitats, whether they're public or privately owned, as much as possible. The picnicking strategy is to conserve natural features, provide picnic facilities in those areas, install them with access to unique park features within a 5-minute walk, filling those gaps that we showed before, and providing group facilities in locations suitable for major gatherings. These are the picnic facilities that exist. You can see the circles just to be able to access them. The light green are existing and the yellow are proposed. So we're proposing to add picnic facilities at Jenkins Creek Park in accordance with that master plan, at the proposed new Echo Park, and at Soco Park to provide balance. These include tables and shelters where it's appropriate. The off-road trail strategy is, again, to connect and create kind of greenway trail corridors. Design the trails depending on the environmental constraints, neighborhood property impacts, and likely users. And utilize the HOA open spaces and trails where feasible and desirable, depending on agreements, if possible, between the cities and the HOAs. And then install signage and wayfinding directories throughout the city so you know where the trails are and where the destinations are that you want to follow. This is the proposed off-road trail systems. You can see them in orange. The solid lines are existing trails and the dotted lines are to fill them in. And this is a pretty extensive trail proposals, but what it's doing is creating loops in and around the cities to major parks, major schools, and commercial destinations. And in some cases, they're following the creeks where possible, or under the power line transmission lines, or on the gas pipelines, and incorporating some of the set-asides that have been done in HOAs and within the city. For bike lanes, we want to fill in the gaps between the off-road trails and parks. We want to design them to be family-oriented, multi-use. We want to resolve some of the safety conflicts, and we want to install signage. The blue are the added bike lanes and on-road, you might call them sidewalk systems, where they're not bike lanes, that link in and around the trail systems and provide more access to the schools, to the parks, and some of the other destinations within the city. So we're proposing to provide 11 more of those. Now some of these are taken off of your previous Prose Plan, and some of these are taken off of your Public Works non-motorized transportation plan. So these, in most cases, are not, quote, derived whole cloth from work that hasn't been done before. The playground strategy is to provide a playground within the 5-minute walking distance, design them to be age appropriate, to increase public access to the HOA and Kent School District where that's feasible and desirable, to upgrade some existing playgrounds to meet ADA requirements, and promote the universal playground feature that you have at Covington Community Park, which is an exemplary facility. Same thing, the light green are what exists. We did not, and we did include the schools where they have playgrounds that are somewhat accessible, and the yellow is where we're proposing to add them. Now, we're not proposing to put a playground in Soco Park, depending on what the master plan for that park resolves, but we do need a playground and a park facility somewhere within the south area in and around the proposed town center site. This is the sports court. We call them sports because we like to see them as multi-use, to combine basketball, pickleball, and volleyball, and in some cases even tennis. These are pretty much neighborhood facilities, so we want them within the 5-minute walking distance. We want to work with the Kent School District where feasible to increase public access to those facilities. We want to upgrade some of those courts to increase surface and equipment life, meet safety concerns, and accommodate new activity interests. This is the distribution again. Now, when some more of these schools have some of these facilities that are potentially usable, and then the three proposed additions are at Covington Community Park, Echo South Park, and then a park site to be determined in the south area. The soccer field strategy is to differentiate between competitive game requirements and practice, so that we're not putting practice sessions on our most competitive fields, but also making fields available that are suitable for practice and not necessarily for competition, at least for the older age youth and adults. To reserve the high quality fields and schedule practice sessions, if possible, on elementary and middle school fields where they are not used, and potentially increase the capacity of those fields. To joint venture with the school district, if possible, to upgrade those so they meet safety concerns, and to work with the leagues to establish standardized and equitable field availabilities so that there's an equity between all the age groups and all the leagues, and upgrade some existing grass fields for turf and lighting to increase capacity and increase performance. We're the only new soccer field will be at Covington Community Park in accordance with this master plan. And we think that there's plenty of fields if we use real estate effectively in joint ventures with the schools to make those available for use. Baseball, softball strategy, again, the same as soccer, differentiate between practice and competitions. Use the elementary and middle school fields where feasible in a joint venture with the school district, come up with standardized and equitable availabilities, and upgrade some existing grass fields. Generally, we're not promoting dedicated fields in the future development of parks. What we're calling the rectangular fields, where you have soccer and then overlaid on that, or at the corners, extended corners for baseball and softball. So we get a better utilization of real estate. Dedicated fields for baseball or soccer tend to be unused during the peak seasons between those two, and they tend to require more real estate than we found as an effective investment strategy. We don't propose, except for the Covington Community Park, whether we use that rectangular field strategy and what exists and what's proposed in the master plan, we don't think you need more fields to meet your requirements. Indoor facilities are to develop multi-generational for child through elder, make the buildings flexible because activities and interests change over time. We don't want buildings that are too specialized to where they can't grow with the interest in the population users. To work with the school district to program their facilities after hours, and support the potential development of a regional aquatics recreation center by a regional agency. The two sites for the regional facility, at least that came out of the feasibility study, were at Town Center or Lake Point Development, and there's another one in Maple Valley. So a lot of that will depend on where that feasibility study goes as far as financing and phasing. Now we're going to go through the specific parks in order and show how those citywide plan elements are reflected in what's proposed for each of these sites. For the Aquatic Center, the potential improvements are really to resolve what the future of that feasibility study is, where it goes and how soon and how it's phased and where it's located and how it's financed. And that will reflect what the ultimate use of your existing center is over time. For Covington Community Park, it's to do phase 3, I'm sorry. And the planned improvements are an education center, a plaza at the corner, as you can see up in here, the developed area, water features, sports courts, a multiple soccer field complex for 1 or 2 on synthetic turf, putting streetscapes along the street corridors, and installing wayfinding and signage. Crystal View Park, what's shown in the green is the property that's being acquired with conservation futures. It's a passive element. It complements what's in the activity area, which is down in this corner, and the potential improvements are to upgrade some of the facilities that are within that existing activity area to make them more ADA and make them a little bit more flexible and efficient. This is Echo Park, the new park that you bought. And the key issue here is to develop a master plan for that property, to provide access into the park, determine really long-term is how this facility is developed. And ideally, as you'll see in the citywide concept, was potentially work with McCullough Camp and maybe property owners to the north to have trails into Pipe Lake, possibly past Pipe Lake in the future on up to Cedar Creek Park as part of your overall trail master plan. This is Evergreen Park. There's a trail through that connects to the pipeline trail, and essentially is to upgrade that trail and put some wayfinding and directory signage in it. This is Friendship Park. Basically, it's a beautiful park. The key issues are maybe upgrade this picnic shelter with water and grills, put in irrigation, a drinking fountain, security cameras on a lot of your parks to control graffiti and use, and then wayfinding signage. This is the Gary Creek Skate Park. The key improvements here would be security cameras and wayfinding signage. This is Jenkins Creek Park, and the plan improvements under the recently completed master plan are to implement that plan. Includes a new access and parking place off of 267th, restores the natural features around the wetland with security camera and wayfinding signage. And by the way, this is the elementary school. This is the your open space property that sits here, and down here is the City of Kent's watershed property. So you can see the objective of running the trail through these corridors. This is Jenkins Creek Trail. The potential improvements would work with the city's trails master plan to see how to extend the trail down Frontage Road, down through this area, down through Jenkins Creek, and then south. Install wayfinding signage and park directory. And this blue area, wherever you see the blue areas, those are complementary properties, at least, that can be fit into what yellow is are the City of Covington's park and open space holdings. This is Rainier Vista Open Space. Again, you can see these green areas are your facilities. The blue are HOAs. There's an HOA park here, an HOA park here, an open space here. They do have a very small park that sits in off of this. The key issue here is a master plan for the site and plan improvements as far as the trail master plan to extending this up not only through Little Shoes, but to the Aquatic Center and Community Park, and then on up to 240th with signage and directories. This is Soco Park. The yellow is the property that's called the park. The green is the open space that you also own down along the creek. The site called 3 is the City of Kent's kind of a watershed property, and site 4 is the King County's property. And your town center parcel is here, although the school district still owns this piece. You're doing a master plan for this property right now. Some of the things that might come out of that master plan are questions about trail, shoreline access, nature interpretive exhibits, and so on. This is Wingfield Open Space. These are your 2 holdings. You also own a storm retention, a very concrete kind of bathtub that you're holding water in here. This is an HOA park. This is an HOA open space, and there is a trail that extends through this area and a trail that extends through the HOA to Kentwood School District. What potentials are here for a master plan to increase the trail access along the creek, further on the creek north and south, install interpretive signage, maybe reconfigure and redo the storm retention as a biofiltration demonstration project. See just how that works and how that would fit better in future storm retention developments. This is the plan, the voter survey results that we just completed. The 234 people completed this survey. These were the zones that we conducted the survey in, or actually the green areas where we used the U.S. Post Office's every door direct mail postcard drops in which to conduct the survey. One of the limitations of the U.S. Postal Service's use of that is that we have to use their routes. In order to use that, every address within their route has to have a postcard. We can't curtail or just do partials, or we lose the ability to use this particular tool. So what it does is it requires us in some cases to drop postcards to addresses that are outside your limits. And that's why in this case, 18% said they lived outside these zones. Now, based on experience, we've usually found that most people don't really know how they fit within city limits. So they may not be quite as high as 18%, but there's still going to be non-city residents involved in this survey. Where do you work? 29% are retired or not currently working. The rest is 17% in Covington and 52% elsewhere in King County, which makes you a commuter community. 75% are registered voters of the city. Now, there may be some residents of the city that aren't registered voters, but what we're looking at is 75% of these responses are voter-based. One of the questions we wanted to know is, what is the estimated walking time to the name of the park closest to your residence? 31% have to walk more than 15 minutes to get to a park. That's why those white gaps in that walkability map are significant when we're looking how to fill them. We asked the respondents to rate the quality of your parks, and we did this on a scale of 1 to 5. So we asked you to pick a 1 if it was a low, to a 5, which is the highest. And then we weighted the averages of everything that was turned in. So if you had a 3 or above, you were a moderate to a moderate high score. So quality was ranked moderate to moderate high, and the rest of these were slightly below in the margins of, say, moderate ratings, location and quantity. When we asked what priority generically of the following park facilities, those that rated the highest, moderate to high, were playgrounds, followed by swimming pools, followed by conservancies along the creek corridors. When we asked, then we took the same kind of graphics that I just went through in the citywide plan elements, and then asked the survey respondents to rank those. So conserving and enhancing the creek corridors was a high to highest priority. Picnic shelters and tables, as we laid it out, was also a high priority. Off-road trails, as it was described, was also a high to highest priority. Bike lanes and sidewalks was a moderate to high priority. Playgrounds and play areas, as shown on that plan element, was a high to highest priority. Sports courts was a moderate priority. Soccer fields, as we proposed there, was a moderate priority. Multi-use fields, and we showed examples of what those would be, were modest priority. Sorry, I repeated that. For the indoor centers, the regional aquatic center was high to highest. And if we also raise the question of, could you also want and or a community center, which is more socially based, without necessarily the aquatic facilities and maybe not as much recreation into it, it still was a moderate above priority. Then we asked, how do these things should be funded to meet your projected park and recreation requirements? And we said additional funds may be necessary, and we gave some options to be ranked. That which had a moderate and above priority was to approve a limited duration levy. Typically, these are 7 years. And the advantage of a levy is that it can not only acquire and develop, it can maintain and operate. So that was a moderate and above. To go to a bond was a moderate. To approve resetting the property tax rate, where the additional increase in the rate would be dedicated exclusively to parks, was less than moderate. If we were to put a bond or limited duration, we asked then to tell us what amount you would be willing to pay per year, per household. 50% would pay above $100, 50% would pay below $100. So about 100 was about what we came out would be about the average amount we could expect a levy or a levy reset or a bond to be the baseline in which to generate the amount of money that you'd be looking for. Then we asked about recreational programs. We said, what do you think should be offered for the following age groups? High to highest went to teens, followed by elementary school, followed by families. But you can see all of them are moderate and above, all of these choices. Then we said, what recreational programs you think should be offered by interest? Those who are at the highest were outdoor recreation and community events. Because you see all except maybe childcare were at least moderate to high, and even childcare was right at the moderate. Then we raised the same question on funding. If you currently recover most but not all costs for providing these programs, depending on the program and user. However, if the program you selected requires more money that can be budgeted from city funds to provide, how would you rate the following methods of paying for the additional costs? The highest was to solicit other funding sources, including donations and sponsorships. But moderate to high was also selectively increased user fees to finance some program services. Probably the least popular of this, low to moderate, was to increase property taxes for shortfalls. The future schedule now is we get the draft plan pretty much in shape. Be to go on the 8th of March to City Council for a workshop to review pretty much what we've just shown you, plus maybe focusing a little bit more on some of the financial issues. And the 22nd of March, then to look for an adoption if we progress through that as scheduled. And Ethan, do you want me to stop sharing now so we can, or do you want me to leave this up in case there are questions that are specific?
Let's just keep it up for and see what kind of questions or comments we get.
And I forgot to ask you, Produce, did you want to add anything?
I mean, no, I'll participate in the discussion.
All right, thank you.
And just to help facilitate, we don't have too many people on the call from the public. So I think if they just use the raise hand function, I can then promote you so you can make a comment at that time. So if anybody from the public has any questions or wants to make a comment, then I will call on you, and I'm starting to see some hands. So, okay. And everybody bear with me. I'm not the Zoom wizard that some people are. So Joe Miles, I'm going to promote you first, and you should be able to unmute and talk to the panel. Joe, you might be muted.
There we go. Yeah, for some reason it disconnected me there for a minute. So, well, first of all, thank you so much for the presentation and all the effort that's gone into this. I think it's just incredibly important. Is this PowerPoint available online for us to review, or is there a document that can be reviewed?
Yeah, there is a project web page. And I will put that in the chat, but this PowerPoint is already uploaded to that web page.
Oh, okay, great. And are there specific policies that are going to be tied to the plan for rather than specific areas? What I'm thinking of is if there's new properties that become available that we aren't aware of today that are in the system, will the plan be available to address like future properties?
Yes, chapter 2 of the plan are the goals and objectives. And the goals are written, the goals and policies are written in such a fashion that states pretty much the strategies that I showed you from conservation areas, picnic areas, and so on, so that it gives you the flexibility if something comes up that's not graphically listed or called out, you have the ability to pursue it. And that's important because GMA says you cannot pursue something that's not in your plan. So we want those goals and policies to kind of provide you a rationale for why you might pursue something that comes up that we've not anticipated so far.
Okay, great. And with this thing going to the council, you know, just in a few weeks, I'm assuming there's still opportunity to make changes between now and then.
Yeah, we're putting together the draft now, but it is a pretty tight timeline, and part of that is to meet the schedule of the state so that we're eligible for grant funding. We'll be posting the draft to the project webpage as well. I did post that URL into the chat. And certainly people can make comments tonight if they have thoughts, but this will also be coming back to the commission next month, there's a possibility for comments, but also people can certainly email me. I'm the Parks Director with the City of Covington if they have any comments, and I can share those with Tom, and we can certainly try to include those. Although,
And
yeah.
and just two more questions quickly. Is this going through SEPA review?
Yes.
And what's the timeline for that?
I don't have that in front of me, but if the notice hasn't been published yet, it will probably be published, I don't know, within this next week. And then I think there's a 2-week review period and then it closes.
Okay, great. And I know, Ethan, you and I are scheduled to talk tomorrow briefly, but in particular, a point I want to make is that King County, Kent, and Covington, we're all part of this wonderful community that needs to work together. And I've been discussing all three parks and open space plans are open simultaneously. And I just think it's critically important that those three jurisdictions work together. And of course, I'm associated with Friends of Seuss Creek Park, and that's kind of a spine that runs between Kent and Covington, and of course owned by King County. And I want to make sure there's policies and direction that uses a collaborative approach of all these jurisdictions working together. So I'll talk with you more tomorrow about that, Ethan. So anyway, thank you for giving me a chance to speak.
Thank you. Okay, now bear with me as I Joe, I'm removing you from the panel. Hopefully that means you go back to an attendee. Okay. Next, I'm just going to go down the list here. So I have Josh Gertzman. I'm going to promote you. Sometimes it does take a short delay, so just hang on there a second.
Hey, Ethan, I'm on. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, I'm actually on my nightly walk with my dogs on the Seuss Creek Trail, so I don't want to have you see a dark screen if I put my camera on. And it's great to come right after Joe every night when I walk past that wonderful rock with I believe it's his mother that it's attributed to. I'm out there, it makes me smile. Been a Covington resident since 1997. I guess nobody was Covington residents before 97, I guess. Really love this community, and I believe I was one of the survey completers, and I'm pretty excited to see that I was pretty consistent with how fellow residents completed the survey. My main comment tonight is recently, my wife and I have been helping out a friend up in the Snoqualmie, city of Snoqualmie, and we've been going up on Sundays, and we just keep discovering these amazing trails and trail connections and trails that go around the parks and trails that get to the shops. And we're like, oh, we want Covington to be like this. We don't want to move out of Covington. We want Covington to grow and have that same feeling, that same connectivity through the trails, the parks, shops, and restaurants that you can get to without having to jump into your car. So I just wanted to jump on tonight, and this is a great presentation to hear, and whatever support we need to do to bring this to reality, I'm hoping our community can step up and do that.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for those comments. And now And I'll maybe just make a quick comment. I mean, I don't want this just to be a one-way kind of comment period. I will say that I think trails and connectivity is something that I hear the commission talk about as a priority and something that's a goal. And I think that came through in the survey as well, not just this time around, but in the previous rounds of the Prose Plan as well. It's certainly a challenge in many ways, but I think it is something that we'll see in that final plan as a priority. So, okay, I have Kylie Rainier. I'm going to promote you, and you should be able to talk, Kylie.
So Kylie's not the one who wants to
Oh.
speak for our household. I'm Patricia Smith, and I Kylie and I moved into Covington in 2004. And I'm interested in the position 7 on the Parks and Recreation. And I was wondering what kind of time commitment goes for the people on the commission.
I can speak to that real quickly. One, I'd be happy to talk to you offline, and you can find my contact information on the city's website. I'm the Parks and Recreation Director. But real quickly, the commission meets once a month regularly. It's often a 1 to 2 hour commission meeting. There might be some time to prepare for the meeting in advance of that, and there might be some other opportunities to support Parks and Recreation in the community. But that's kind of the base level of what a commissioner's role and commitment would be. And I didn't get your name. I guess the name on the that's coming up on the screen is different than yours. Can you repeat that for me?
Patricia Smith.
Okay, thank you, Patricia Smith.
And for people applying for the positions, when do you think the hiring date or the acceptance date would be?
Currently, it's just open until filled. So if you're interested, just go ahead and there's an application on the city's website, or if you reach out to me, I can help get that to you as well. So we just review those as they come in, and it's the city council that makes the appointment to the commission.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. Next, I have a hand up by Andrew Lechner. So I'm gonna select you to be able to talk.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Perfect. First, wanted to thank you again for presentation. It's great having all this material right in front of us. Had two questions. First, on any of the parks where there's a developed master plan, do you have any idea what kind of a time frame we're looking at for seeing any improvements?
So I'm trying to do a couple things at once. So I'm going to try to say back what I think I heard. You noticed that under a number of the park improvements, there was a master plan element. And you're wondering timeline for doing the master plans or making any of those improvements. Is that the question?
Yeah, what the timeline looks like from developed master plan to having a master plan to breaking ground on things.
Sure, I can kind of give a typical scenario would be, if there's funding to do a master plan, that process often takes about a year. Sometimes it can be a little quicker. Sometimes it can take a little longer, depending on the size of the project. And then usually there's at least a year for design and developing plans. And then it could be another year or more to actually do construction, to bid it out and do construction. Now that's just kind of a general outline. It can really be stretched out much longer if we have to phase a project, which is a pretty common scenario these days, as trying to get all the money to do a full build out of a park all at once is a challenge. So
I bet. Okay, thank you. And other question is specific to Eco Park. Do you know if there are plans on having parking available there, or is that going to be walking trails in?
I'll take that one too. That will depend on the master plan. So really, until we do a master plan, which evaluates the site condition, what's it suitable for, as well as, receiving public input, we really don't make any decisions. Although that park is usually, you try to provide some level of parking, just because we do live in a kind of area where some people do have to drive to parks, if not a lot of people. So there could be parking there, but whether it's a big parking lot or just street side parking or something like that really is to be determined.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Ethan, there are a couple of questions on the chat box.
All right, let's switch to the chat box real quick. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Oh, there's a question about any thoughts on a bike park or pump track. And Tom, did we ask about a pump track at all in any of those questions, or would that have been a response under kind of a other category? Do you
We didn't
recall?
ask directly about that. I know that they're very popular now. You do have kind of the BMX improvements up by your community park, but that's not a pump track as they've been developed. So yes, that's an open question, I think.
And I'll just add to that. I think we did recently do a survey for Soco Park, as we're in the middle of that master planning process. And I believe that was one of the park elements. We did ask whether, to the people taking the survey, is that something that would be of interest? I don't believe it scored very high, but pump tracks and bike tracks, I think those things, certainly serve a niche group or a segment of the community. They're not going to always score high because it's not like a trail or a park shelter, which really is something that would be accessible to everybody. So it is on our radar that those things are of interest, but it hasn't been really targeted for any specific park at this point. So though that was a couple of questions, and then there was one other question as to whether there'll be a playground at Soco Park. There is actually an agenda item later on in this commission where we're going to get an update on Soco Park, but I can share at least a limited bit of information at this point that there is planning for play spaces at Soco Park. They may be more of a natural type playground or play space. But if you're interested in the Soco Park kind of master planning, maybe stay on for the later part of this meeting, or we also have a project webpage for Soco Park, and that's a great place to kind of stay tuned to developments with that project. I'm going to switch back to, we do have a few hands raised still. And Tarek, we'll get to you next because I also saw you had a question in the chat. So I'm going to let you talk right now. You should be able to talk, Tarek.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. I'm a new resident of Covington, moved in here last year. Love the place, love the efforts that you guys are driving, so thank you. I have a couple of questions about the Covington pools, specifically the Covington Aquatic Center. It's two questions actually. One is, are there plans to increase timing of open pool hours, because Sundays totally shut down, and my son loves to go swimming, so I would certainly use the facilities on Sundays. And that was the first question. And the second question, on the slide there about the aquatic aquatic center, there was mention that you may be doing some improvements. It wasn't clear what those improvements were. It looked like you were planning a whole rebuild, But if you can just highlight or shed more light on that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. I'll start with your first question, which just has to do with, open hours and schedule of our current aquatic center. And it is true, we've reduced hours of programming the last 2 years, largely due to COVID-19 and that impact upon our operation. Just like most places, we are kind of trending and adding more hours and opening more programs incrementally. So I think I can't say for now when we'll be open again on Sundays, but that's certainly the intention, is to return back to a 7-day-a-week operation and something more similar to what we were doing in 2019, which may be before you were a resident of Covington, but we did have a 7-day-a-week operation, and that's what we'll plan to return to at some point.
Great, thank you. Yep.
And then I think your other question was really what's the future of that facility or a facility like that in Covington? And I would just say there is a feasibility study that it has kind of taken place over the last 1.5 years to do a new facility that would be more of a regional facility in partnership with Maple Valley, and that's still a to be determined type project. It's so we don't know if that will happen or not, but if it does, that certainly would be a new facility that would replace our existing facility. And if it doesn't happen, then there certainly will have to be some decisions as to does the community reinvest into the existing facility, and is that even possible? So certainly is on our radars, but I don't really have any solid projects that are planned for that at this point that are funded.
Okay, so no site has been picked, no funding has been reserved, and no timelines yet, right?
Well, there is some funding that has been received. We have a grant fund from the state to do a feasibility study and some design work for a new facility. And so that's what's helping us at this point in time. But to actually funding to build a facility, we don't.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Ethan, is the feasibility website still active? Because if you pop that in the chat, that might be a good resource for him to take a look at, and anybody else who's interested as well.
I can do that real quickly.
Sorry, just adding to your list of things to do here.
Thank you.
That's all right.
Yes, you're welcome. I mean, I can just add, while Ethan is working here, we put a lot of work into that feasibility study. That website has a lot of great information and kind of our vision for a possible future facility. So there's a lot there to dig into and hopefully to get excited about, because it will be very much a community effort in order to make that happen.
Okay, thank you. Yep. I'll try and load it up, and I found the slides that were presented today, so I'm adding the link here for everybody.
Thank you, Tarek.
Thank you.
Next, I have Jonathan Ingram. I'm going to promote you to allow you to talk, and you should be able to speak, Jonathan.
Hey, folks. I'm sorry if my voice is a little strained. I'm not feeling particularly well, but I did want to thank you for the excellent presentation. It contained a lot of very useful information. I really liked the vision for the Parks Network and the trails. And I wanted to say thanks for all the hard work. Have a great night.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too, or hear from you. Okay. We have one more person with their hand up. Be Keen, I've just promoted you, so you should be able to speak.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me okay?
I can, yeah, we can.
So first of all, thanks for all the work on this. This is really encouraging. You know, we moved here in 2001, hope to stay here quite a while still, if not maybe retire here. My question may be kind of too specific on the plan at this point, but one thing I really wanted to bring up is basketball facilities. So I coached basketball for many, many years at Covington Parks and Rec, and with Kent Parks and Rec also. And it seems to me like most of the basketball facilities within the area are just within the HOAs. I don't really know of few if any public basketball courts. So One is, I think we need more public basketball courts. And number two, if you look at the, when you get to the middle school age, the high school age, we have a lot of that age group around here, like you showed in the, that family demographic. Those kids love to play full court basketball. They like to get in, hang out, play 5-on-5, get in a court like they have up in Renton. So I'd like to know if the, somewhere, basketball facilities in general, and specifically if we've ever looked at a full court option, and also given the latitude we're at and it gets dark at, 4:30 in the wintertime, a lighted full court basketball somewhere in the plan, if that's been considered or looked at.
Tom,
Yeah,
I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit, and when you talk about sports courts, what that might all encompass.
Sure. There's some examples of the sports courts in the draft plan. And some of them are half size and some are full size. But the idea of a sports court is it's basketball plus. So it's basketball and pickleball, and in some cases, if a full court, it's tennis or volleyball, so that there's multiple use, not just one particular activity. We are proposing, or at least in the plan, to upgrade some existing. I think there are 2 or 3 in your park system. And then we've also proposed them in the new parks, Echo, Soco Park, Jenkins Creek, and the community park as well.
All right, that sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Jonathan, I see your hand up. Did you have another question? If you keep it up, nope, you took your hand down. Okay. I'm going to go back and check our chat real quick. Doesn't look like anything new is there. I guess at this point, Tom, is there anything you'd want to close out the open house with at this point? Or if not, we can transition to our next agenda item, which is for the commission to ask questions and discussion.
Well, I think that we've covered in the PowerPoint, I think, the status. And then since you put these things up for the draft plan and this on the website, I think that we're good for now.
Okay, maybe if you stop sharing your screen, then that'll kind of put us back to
There we go.
See everybody's faces. And then Laura, I'll kind of hand it off to you, I guess, to kick this off, but really it'll be an opportunity for the commission to ask any questions or share any comments.
Yeah, and just before we do that, for members of the public, you're welcome to hang out for the rest of the commission meeting to watch and to observe. The commission is going to ask questions. And then we're going to get an update on Soco Park and some of the concepts being proposed for that, and also for Jenkins Creek Park. So if those things are interesting to you, feel free to stick around and watch and listen and learn. So public is always welcome. Okay, so transitioning over then to new business number 1. So commission, this is our chance to talk with Tom Ferduce and anybody else who's on here related to the Prose Plan. Questions that we have, thoughts, concerns, support of what has been said, additions of what has not been said. So I can open up the floor for the commissioners. You know that I could talk all night about my own thoughts and opinions, but I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to say something. And if nobody says something, I might just go around and start like calling on people to make sure you get your chance. So anybody want to be the first victim?
I can be the first victim. That's fine. My question is, when looking at Covington Community Park, I saw that there was lighting for like future and phase 3, like soccer fields. Is there a plan to light the current fields? Since I know that CCP is a big part of our soccer recreational area, but it gets so dark so quickly, especially with fall and spring soccer. So that was my question.
I'd have to go back and check what our master plan on Covington Community Park actually shows. I think it does show the new fields being lit. Maybe that's what you're saying. I don't think it shows the existing field being lit, but that's somewhat of a design choice and could always be reevaluated during, the phase 3 design. That'd be something that, we would engage at least the commission with and finding out. Certainly, as soon as you light a field, it opens up the doors to much more use, especially during the darker months. Typically, they're only lit when you make them synthetic turf, just because you start putting more play on a field, and grass just has a tougher time without giving it rest. So, but that's a good observation. There's even been some discussion about possibly just lighting that field and converting it to synthetic turf before phase 3 were to happen, just because it would be a less expensive project, so perhaps more feasible. So.
Laura, I'll go with a question and kind of in parallel with our community member that is the basketball coach. Growing up in Covington, I had access to a lot of the schools that were nearby to go out and play basketball or roller hockey at Crestwood and whatnot. And it feels like now that my kids are enrolled in those schools, they're much more closed off and less accessible to access any of that park space. We went for a walk just to take a tour this weekend, and all of the gates are closed. It's very inaccessible. It's very unhospitable, I guess, is a nice way to put it. And I'm just wondering if that's by design by the school district to keep people out on the weekends, which I'm guessing it is based on it. But is there potential to open that up with better security in the area to ward off any of the vandalism that they're concerned about?
Well, I think that's a fair observation, and I think we've heard that from other people in the community from time to time as well. And I think what's nice with the draft plan that Tom's put together is it does emphasize and stress that there is an opportunity for using spaces from the school district in more of a community fashion, and maybe that'll take some work to figure out why are they doing that, and can we be helpful in is it a security issue? Is it a maintenance issue? Is it what's the issue that's causing them to do that? And what's the solution that maybe we can be part of? But yeah, I think that's a fair observation.
That's kind of a national trend as a result of a lot of the school shootings. There's much more of an emphasis on security. And I think the question going forward is, can you have both? Can you have security and have access? And that may take a little bit of work.
Jeff, Steve, Jenny, anything that's on your mind that you want to ask Tom or Ferdouse?
I had a question regarding there was a lot of talk about adding cameras, and we had previously heard from others that cameras really didn't do much good, so there wasn't much of a purpose in installing cameras. So I question, has there been a change of opinion with regard to the add of cameras?
I will say that depending on who you ask, you get different opinions as to the impact of cameras. Some people will say there's certainly a deterrent, keeping honest people honest. Some people will say criminals will be criminals either way, and they're probably both right. I think having them in the plan, the idea is that allows us to have that discussion further site by site, and if it's determined that it will be helpful, then that is an option or a tool that's available. We do hear, and I think you probably all hear it too, that people see the vandalism, or that tends to be the biggest thing that really happens in our parks, and they get frustrated about it, and they want the city to do something about it. And so, it's unlikely that we're going to be able to afford staffing parks and having, security or rangers of some sort at our local parks. So what options do we have? And that's kind of the one item that we can put out there. So that's kind of where it's coming from.
Okay, any other questions from the commission? Yeah, Jeff.
Any word on the dog park part of it?
Tom, did we capture, I know that we included that as part of the survey question, either number 1 or number 2, maybe both, I can't remember. And is that something that you can recall as to where that landed, or?
In both surveys, it was not a very high priority. It wasn't the lowest possible priority, but it wasn't in what I would call moderate above.
That's what I remember too. And it makes, there's certain things, and it's kind of similar to the pump track comment, right? Like there's going to be a segment of the community that is a very important priority. And that's not to say, and so for that reason, it should be at some point probably part of the park system. But when it comes to comparing to walking trails or things like that, it's hard to compare those things because everybody can kind of enjoy a walking trail or a pedestrian way. So I will say that that's going to come up again in the Soco Park conversation that'll be happening later tonight. And certainly there is an awareness that, dog parks are a desire of a group of people in the community. So
I think the dog park is like the pump track. You have trails that are dog friendly. All the trails that we propose in your plan are for dogs on leash. And you do have places, including the BMX component of your community park. But when you move to a facility, either a pump track or an actual dog park, those are much more specialized. They're a little difficult to site. You don't just drop them in anywhere. So not to say that you don't need them or can't have them, but you need to do some due diligence before you decide if you're going to include them and where you put them.
If I could add to Tom that we have specific policies for dog parks as well in the document.
On the dog park piece, I'd say it's a little bit more different than the pump park, right? As if you put in a pump park next week, I don't think you're going to see a large increase of consumerism or people patroning that park, right? If you put in a dog park, you're creating a place where the community can gather that people don't have a place currently to bring their dogs legally in the city to enjoy other than walking down the trail. Plus, there are people that, I don't know many, but don't like dogs. And they would probably avoid a dog park and prefer that the dogs be congregating there more than on all of their local trails that they'd like to avoid. But there are people fearful of dogs and from past experiences that probably would enjoy seeing less population of dogs where they're out on the trails at now. Jeff, we'll have to chat offline about how we can start building some support in the community for a dog park.
I think the other issue is whether you design and develop it as a community dog park or a regional dog park, because you tend to attract people from outside the city. So you've got to anticipate what the volume of use will be and who they would be when you move in that direction.
Well, right now we have Maple Valley Dog Park at Four Corners. There's a tiny one at Reber Ranch. There's a tiny one at Kelly's Latte stand by Clark Lake, and next to the YMCA, they have another small one. And we travel all the way out to Grandview and SeaTac, which is a 30-acre dog park. And because Maple Valley gets packed, I mean, dogs are running over dogs there, and it's a fairly nice sized park. But we have to travel out of here just to go and let our dogs run.
Tom, I have a question. So all the information that's been presented is really, really good. Are there any suggestions in the Prose Plan for implementation? Like, how do we make some of this happen? Things that you see that are steps that you see that Covington could take to kind of put some of these aspirations in the Prose Plan to work so that we can make them reality?
We've moved a lot of the technical information into appendixes. Appendix E is the financial appendix. And then there we take a look at what are the trends that you had in your general fund and financing your Prose expenditures and programs, and what are some of the options you could use to implement financing of these projects. A GMA says that when you establish your level of service, it has to be feasible. It can't be unrealistic. So Appendix E is important to be able to demonstrate that it is possible and what are some of the alternatives you could use. Generally, though, our intention is to prove it's feasible using a number of different ways and let council then decide which ones to use at which proper time. I can tell you we're drafting that right now, and you're not going to have any problem financing the things we've shown you tonight. But you will use a number of tools, and a lot of the tools you're already using now, so it won't be painful.
Yeah, and I would like to add to Tom's comment that when we did the public participation and we got a lot of surveys and responses, and you saw the priority listing. So that's going to be one of the tools. Is like you have to prioritize your projects where you put your money first.
I think another issue is most of the plans in the past have just focused on, well, how do we pay to develop things? And we've taken a bigger picture and saying, well, what does it cost you to do everything? From maintenance to operating an aquatic center, doing your recreation programs, and doing your overall administration and design. So it's a holistic picture. We've also identified in there what some of the costs would be for other players to do some of the things that are in the plan versus your share. And we found that that's vitally important if you're going to be successful in getting this plan off the ground. Well, I guess I would say, Laura, it's coming.
Okay, great. I'm glad that there's something coming.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I've been around long enough that I've seen a couple of these come and go. And so the implementation part is becoming more and more important to me as time goes on, and things are happening in parks in Covington, but you always want it all yesterday. So
you don't want your plan to be on the shelf and forget about it.
Exactly. Super. Okay, that was my biggest question. Okay, anything else, Commission, before we let these lovely people go? Last chance. Okay. Well, Tom and Ferdows, thank you so much for all of your time tonight and all the work that you're doing that we don't see behind the scenes to make this plan something that's workable and livable, and hopefully we can make it a reality in our city.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
We're having fun, Laura.
Oh, good. Super. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thanks, and have a good night.
Thank you. Okay, Ethan, I'm going to turn number 2 over to you so you can introduce the consultants. And this is the presentation of concept designs and the project update for Soco Park.
Yeah, so I'll just do a quick introduction. We, as you know, contracted with HBB Landscape Architecture to help us do a master plan for Soco Park, as well as also help us do the project through what we're calling phase 1, which we're kind of learning what phase 1 is going to be as part of this process. And so today is really an update from our consultant team to share with you some designs as well as a preferred concept design, and also an opportunity for you to ask any questions or share any thoughts as well. And so we have Juliet Vaughn and Mary Alvear. I'm not sure if I got the name right. I hope so. From HBB, and I'm going to turn it over to them right now. Hopefully you should be able to unmute and we should be able to hear you.
right. Hopefully that worked. It always takes a minute to find the unmute button with all of these various programs. My name's Juliet Vong. As Ethan said, I'm really excited to talk to you tonight about Soco Park and present what we're calling our preferred master plan. Our goal tonight is to get any comments and feedback from you on the preferred master plan. We're going to talk a little bit about what our potential phase 1 improvements are. And then hopefully leave a fair amount of discussion. I know you've got a full agenda tonight, so I might be going through it kind of fast just because I know you've at least had a little introduction into the park. And then Merritt with me today will chime in if I get a little off track or start to take a little bit too long on this. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Make sure that you can see this. And then full screen mode. All right, so quick check just for some head nods or some verbal. Can everybody see my screen okay?
We can see it.
All right, awesome. I do tend to get a little focused on this, so I'm not paying as much attention to verbal cues on the faces that I can see. So Ethan, if I need to stop or if someone raises a hand, please just speak up so I can pause for you when needed.
Sure. If I can just quickly, would you prefer to have questions as you go or have folks hold questions until the end?
I tend to prefer to have questions as we go. That way we can address them while they're fresh in your mind. Between Merritt and I will try to keep us on track. And so I might interject and try to move us along if the questions start getting a little too detailed or if the information you're asking for is coming up in the presentation.
That sounds good. And I think it's okay if the commissioners just unmute and interject. I think that'll be fine rather than waiting for a hand raised.
All right. So as you can see, we do have a fairly long agenda, or at least it looks fairly long. I'm going to cruise through some of the project background and existing conditions, assuming most of you are probably at least familiar with where the park is at. So I'm going to go kind of quickly through the first part of this so I can spend some time on the alternatives and the preferred master plan. This is where we're at. So if you're not quite familiar yet, we're right across the street from the future town center off of Wax Road. So you can see Soco Park circled in red. We are along Jenkins Creek and just a little bit south of Jenkins Creek Park. All of our base maps are going to actually be twisted just a little bit. So instead of north arrow being straight up, we're going to be a little bit off to the side. So when I use the term north, I mean to the right-hand side of the page. When we say south, we mean to the left, since north is not really quite in perfect orientation to these. The park is a series of 3 parcels purchased and this initial phase through grant opportunities and grant money. As we start to go through the site, our site is heavily covered by sensitive areas. So you have this white line represents the boundary of our site in Wax Road. We have Jenkins Creek off to what will be our plan east. And the wetland associated with it. If you've been out there at all, where the creek ends and the wetland begins is a really fuzzy line. Really, the ordinary high water of the creek is the wetland boundary. So that sets all of our buffers conveniently in kind of one line for both the stream and the wetland. We have a setback line and then of course our shoreline lines. You can see our sort of completely unencumbered portion of the park is relatively narrow at the top. There's a little more flexibility with what we can do within the shoreline designation. So that gives us about the upper half-ish of our park. And then the lower half is really wetland and wetland buffer. Some quick photos I'm going to flip through of what it looks like today. You can see there's some areas of heavily treed sites. There's also a fair amount of open space where the houses used to be. This is kind of standing in one of those parcels looking back to Wax Road and where the school used to sit right across. So that would then be the future town center. So there are actually some pretty good sight lines leading back into these parcels. There are some invasives that are starting to take over, but once you get back into that wetland buffer area, there's also some really nice areas of natural stands of trees and a nice native understory as well. And then you get little sneak peeks of wetland and or creek. Water table is very high, so you can never really tell if you're standing on the wetland or the creek edge, but you can see the water. And you can see a lot of that wetland vegetation as it sort of comes in and through. We spent a fair amount of time up front doing a site analysis. We did a full topographic survey of the site that's come back recently. We looked at land use, views, sensitive areas, open space, kind of looking at the overall character. What does it look like and feel like? And just trying to get a sense of what really makes the most sense for activities and programming at the park. We spoke at length with the city staff, also through the survey that I'll get into in a little bit about really what we would want to see, what this park wants to be. And so a lot of it was really a place to gather and play. I think there's this dichotomy of a natural environment, but we're also right across from town center. We're in downtown. So it wants to be a place to gather. It wants to have a little bit of an urban flavor up close to the road where we're connecting to town center, but you have this really significant natural system on the park as well. So a lot of the discussion was about enhancing that, experiencing it, educating it, but also really balancing it with recreation opportunities. This is a snapshot of the Prose Plan, which I'm going to pretty much skip over because you just had a lengthy discussion on it. But when we started this process, we knew there was a lot of surveying going on for the Prose Plan as well. And so we really wanted to start with what the community was telling you as part of the overall park system. And that was what some of these priorities represented. And then we also had a separate survey for just Soco Park. And we asked kind of a series of questions, you know, now that you've sort of seen what citywide needs are, what specifically do you think we should do at Soco Park? And so we had 612 survey respondents, over 350 like specific comments, which I always think is great because that means someone took the time to write something, not just click the boxes. And a lot of our respondents, as you can see, live in the city. 27% live within walking distance, which is pretty significant as well for this park. So you can kind of see highlighted in the bold, really the recreation programming elements that people wanted to see most in the park, very much in line with what you just heard for the overall Prose Plan, walking trails, playgrounds. Some interesting ones for us, restrooms, parking, and lighting actually came out much higher than we might have normally expected. And then if you look at what the community concerns are, you can start to see some of that rationale. A lot of the concerns we heard were homelessness, safety, security. So you can kind of start to see where lighting and parking and restrooms, like places that people could actually come experience the park, but also feel safe and comfortable in the park. You'll hear us as we go through this process talk a lot about site distances, I think, as we get into the development of the park improvements. We did get a lot of comments in that other category about splash pads and dog parks. And also quite a bit of interest in pickleball, disc golf, and other kinds of court facilities. What you'll see for what we're proposing for programming on the park itself, those are elements that I know are needed. I think you've heard a lot about them tonight already. Unfortunately, don't fit with our grant funding opportunities for this particular site, and being so heavily burdened with wetlands and streams aren't necessarily the best use in that close proximity. But there are something that is continuing to be heard, and so continuing to, I think, just explore what those opportunities might be. Maybe not at Soco, but certainly in other locations. So what we're proposing to look at here as our starting point was a lot of the programming that you see listed here, certainly playground, but also nature play, which I think fits a little bit with that environmental background that we have on the site. Restrooms, flexible event space, in particular gathering spaces and those event spaces, because of our location across from the future town center, we want lots of flexibility to spill over into the park when there are larger events in the community. Community gardens, interactive water features, interpretive signage, and I think just trails and just open space. So fairly typical kind of park improvements, but with maybe a little bit extra elements you might not see elsewhere because of that proximity to the town center. So we started with 3 concepts. I'm really just going to kind of highlight super high level what these concepts represented and spend more time on the preferred concept. This first concept was intended to be sort of that minimum touch, minimum improvement. So outside of a soft surface trail, all of our improvements are focused as far as we could up to the west end of the park near Wax Road. You can see in all of our concepts, we have ADA parking on site itself. There is a future improvement, and you'll see that in the preferred plan for Wax Road, where you will have on-street parking. But ADA accessibility and a parallel parking is very difficult. So having on-site ADA accessible parking was important. Playgrounds, nature plays, entry plazas, open lawn picnic tables, all of those are elements in all three concepts. So you get into the second concept, it's a little bit more programming, a little bit more open space. We start to bring in the idea of a removable stage and an amphitheater, maybe a little bit larger entry and a gateway. There's a very iconic tree right next to Wax Road that is very visual. So the idea of preserving and using that tree as a bit of an icon for the park. And we brought in the idea of these nature play nodes as well. So not just traditional playground, but just really informal play. So think, logs and rocks and things like root wads, things that are just part of nature already, but arranged in a way that just gives a little bit of space to allow people to explore. And then the third concept kind of reached the farthest down into that wetland and creek system, really looking at overlooks and boardwalks, outdoor classrooms, things that would be geared more towards that natural system. A little bit larger entry, more defined amphitheater with the removable stage and some more open lawn spaces. What we see for the preferred master plan, after reviewing the comment responses and talking about this further, both with city staff, also the planning staff for our limitations for the wetlands and the buffers. We have our preferred master plan that we're showing here tonight. The amphitheater and event space and flexibility to have events was actually really important. And so we kept kind of that larger entry plaza with a mid-block crossing that would go to the future town center. You can see we're starting to show the future improvement of Wax Road. So it would have on-street parking. We'd have kind of a large space without parking that you could facilitate closing down the street for festivals. Really grand sort of gesture across to the town center. A lot of this, I think, detailed design will really depend on how that town center developed, but we want to make sure and leave a lot of flexibility for that design to progress over time. Bringing in some sort of art gateway feature, something that really kind of gives this its own unique kind of icon, its own unique space within the system and within this kind of town center zone. Play area, a lot of open lawn space kind of surrounding it, and then our ADA parking and stormwater associated with it off on this side. Series of picnic shelters, it's one of the things we have heard again and again is both really successful at the community park. And then our nature play nodes, a little bit more formal amphitheater. This right here is where that iconic tree sits. And then we brought in a trail to kind of go, whether it's hard surface or soft surface, to expand down into the wetland, the buffer, but not into the wetland itself. So that's kind of that balancing of being able to understand and educate, but not necessarily impact the wetland itself. A small overlook so you can see it, some outdoor classrooms, and then also future connections to Jenkins Creek Trail, knowing that that is a long-term goal to connect from here all the way to the existing Jenkins Creek Park and potentially beyond. I'm going to pause here and take a breath and just see if there's any specific comments or questions about the master plan itself.
Okay, Parks Commission, jump in with your thoughts and your observations. What do you think?
I think I want somewhere where my kid can go to the bathroom and not a porta potty.
Good question, and we debated that quite a bit. I would like to hear a little bit more. Long-term town center will have city hall. There would be restrooms. There would be opportunities across the street. Does it need to also have its own public restroom here or not? That was kind of a question we've been a little bit debating.
So
I think getting a 3-year-old waiting for the crosswalk is going to be the challenge.
I will chime in with Robert. My kids are older, but I remember very clearly when they were younger, and this was also when we were master planning Covington Community Park, and I was adamant you have to have the bathrooms by the playground because all the moms are going to hate you if they have to lug all their kids off the playground and go hiking to a bathroom. But I am also a runner, and so I often am running through the city, and having accessible bathrooms is important to me as somebody who's just exercising. Because you need them. And when you're running and you need a bathroom, you need a bathroom. So that is another kind of maybe overlooked use of bathrooms, but they do provide that service as well to people who are out and about and moving through.
Okay.
Question. What kind of fish do we have fishing in that creek at all? Like salmon or trout or anything?
Ethan, I don't remember off the top of my head. I think there was I know we had some fish passage problems on one side or the other of us. I can't remember where.
Yeah, I know it's designated as a salmon bearing stream. Although I've also heard that there's some fish passage issues south of this. So I can't say I've ever seen fish in the creek. Not that I've spent any time looking. I haven't seen people fishing in it either. I don't know if any of the other commissioners have, just known in the neighborhood whether people fish in there or not. I don't know.
I've definitely seen fish in it, and it was over 2 decades ago. And it was when it flooded and the fishery reservoir from Lake Youngs had completely overflown. And there were salmon from North Covington to South Covington, and we were carrying them in buckets back to the creek when the water started receding. As I think I was probably 12, so it was 25 years
Is that
ago.
when it took out the walking bridge there at Jenkins Creek Park?
I think that one was after it. This was like 25 years ago. This would have been it.
I know the county can easily answer the question on what's going on in that creek. They monitor all these creeks quite well. So
not really a fish bearing. It's not a recreational fishing area would be what I would answer though.
And access from the site for fishing with how limited space we have, I think would not be the best opportunity. You just can't get in there, and you have so much wetlands before you even get to the creek. You'd have a hard time getting to where any fish actually were. We do have an environmental biologist as part of our team. They went and did the initial wetland review, and so they're doing some of the additional background. We're kind of early in our design process, so we'll have a lot more documentation on some of both what's out there now, but also the opportunities for restoration and mitigation and other sorts of things as part of our process.
I think I have a question that's probably more for Ethan, but when I drove by Wax Road the other day, are the properties that are like adjacent to Soco Park for sale, and does the city of Covington plan on purchasing those, or is it?
So Laura, I spoke with Laura about this a few days ago and wasn't going to bring this up, but we do have signed purchase and sale agreements for those. And so I'll just kind of talk about this real quickly. This will come back to the commission in the future, but yes, the 2 single family unit homes just to the north of the existing park were listed for sale. And we were able to negotiate a purchase and sale agreement for both of those properties. When the city purchases properties, we do it a little differently than the typical kind of private to private sale transaction occurs. So there's a long kind of, not long, but 90-day feasibility or contingency period that we have to review if we actually want to purchase it. So what that does, it allows this agenda item to come back to the commission as well as the council for approval to move forward with that purchase. But there is that opportunity that and potential for that to happen. So that's great to whenever those opportunities come along and you have willing sellers. So
Mike, I have a question regarding the incorporation of whatever we're going to do within town center in this. It was originally discussed when the town center was even envisioned that this park would stretch across the street into town center. And I'm not sure how that, it appears that we're only focusing on one side of the street. Are thoughts being given at all as to what would go on the other side of the street, or are we just going to focus on one side for the time being?
So I think you're referencing the plaza that was in some of the early concepts for the town center site. And that would be considered a separate project. Certainly, I think there's a notion that this park would connect and have some sort of relationship with a plaza that would be across the street. But this project is advancing now, so prior to development of any town center site. So I think that's where the mid-block crossing tries to speak to, recognizing that there'll be a plaza and some public spaces on the other side. But that would be part of the town center site development, separate from this.
One thing you will see as we move a little further towards the presentation, we have a couple of slides that speak to what we're proposing as a phase 1 improvement. That phase 1 has a lot of thoughts been put into not precluding and allowing some flexibility for a design that's not quite done yet, right, for the town center, and trying to leave space to have design feel very fluid and very coordinated between the two sites. Timing will sort of dictate a little bit how that ends up playing out. But at least as phase 1, we're intentionally leaving, a lot of plaza sort of areas less defined. So we, 1, for budget purposes, but 2, to give a little bit extra time for a more concerted, coordinated effort.
Thank you.
I just want to jump in and look at, say some of the things I really like about this. I like the entry plaza, the mid-block crossing, since we're kind of talking about that and that effort to tie it into the future town center. And I love that there are trails, pretty much everywhere you can put some type of path, there is a path. And I was hoping that we would be able to do in here kind of what we had done at Covington Community Park, which is kind of put trails into the wetland area, to use that area, to activate that area. It kind of double whammy, give people the walking paths and trails they need and utilize all the space that we can. Plus it's really so beautiful back there, and it looks like that has been done really well. So I really like that. And I also like this idea of the playful art / fountain. And because we don't have a splash pad in this city, it would be really fun if we had some type of art / water feature that kids could be encouraged to interact with. I don't know if you necessarily want them getting in it per se, but if there was some type of interactive element to it. So I love that vision. The couple of things that I just want to add is I want the best playground we can possibly put in this park, with the constraints that we have, the biggest, baddest playground that we can get, because that's a thing. And I mean, you saw it in the Prose Plan. This is a city of young families. We don't have a ton of playgrounds. Covington Community Park is packed out all the time. It is snowing and people are there with their kids. It's almost ridiculous. So as big as we can make the playground, I am in full support of it. As a parent who had little kids, the playground kind of being on one side and the nature play nodes being on another side, I'm thinking I've got multiple kids and they're kind of going different directions. So I don't know if it's possible to bring those a little closer together and make sure that there's good sight lines between those things, because I have 4 kids and they would never stay in one place. So if we can look at consolidating a little bit the play areas, so we don't have the temptation for kids to spread out all across the park, because that's stressful for their parents. The other thing that I wanted to add, just as a design feature, one thing that I've noticed parents doing now is they'll take their kids to the playgrounds or pools and they will walk circles around the playground. So they want to be moving, but still keep an eye on their kids while they're playing. So if we can have some type of walking path that goes around the playground, or enough so that parents feel like they can keep their eyes on their kids but still be moving, I think that would be, yes, kind of beneficial too. And I don't have
you could.
Yeah, I don't have a good sense of how big of a space that is. So
yeah,
I'm really bad with estimating.
Half a block-ish, right? It's
right. So I mean, maybe I don't know. If we move, if it shifted the nature play nodes kind of over to the back side of that, then I could see that, because it's kind of one elongated play thing. But that was just, I was at swim lessons last night and a mom was literally walking around the pool deck. And so that really kind of solidified it for me, oh yeah, that people are moving. They want to move while their kids play. So that was just something that I noticed.
Yeah, Laura, great point. That's definitely something that you notice also at Friendship Park.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't encircle the play area, but the parents will literally just walk laps while the kids are playing on the small play place.
Right. And then, I mean, we already talked about this, but I second what Robert said about the bathroom, and the bathroom needs to be like right by the playground. So, but otherwise, this is beautiful and very exciting. I really like so much of this. Okay, commission. Yeah, anything else, commission? Let's see. Just want to make sure that I'm not missing anybody. Okay. All right. Well, Juliet, do you want to keep on?
Yep, I can keep on going.
Okay.
I guess for a couple of things on the planning side itself, as we start to move forward, of course, we're early in our process. We had staff out looking at the existing trees. What you can't quite see on this is the existing trees extend kind of a fair amount, but they're not really the healthiest trees. And so one thing you'll see is where this existing tree line ends will vary once we get a lot more detail on the health of those existing trees. The goal is to open up sight lines. We might not be able to open them up quite as much. If there's some really truly beautiful big trees, we'll adjust things to try and preserve those trees. The other thing we realized when we were out there doing some more reconnaissance is one of the best views is actually more in this area for the overlook. And so we moved the nodes. We actually already moved them over closer to where that overlook was, which gives us better visibility, both from the street and the open space to the overlook, which is important. So you can, if anyone's out there and back in that overlook, you have a little bit of some sight lines to it, as well as that visual connection between the play area and the nodes. So I'm glad you brought that up. And those are some of the things that we're going to continue to adjust in the plan. Phase one, we do have a very defined budget to get phase one improvements done. The ADA parking is a requirement to get ADA accessibility into the park. So that's one of the key elements of phase one. The other one we are required to do as well is to get our street frontage, not the full street frontage, but to get the walkway, pedestrian walking route along the limits of our street frontage. So that is, these are two kind of significant elements of phase one that are required. Once we set those in place, we start building what we can to build into the elements. The playground itself is a very expensive element. It's not part of phase one. We want it to be big and bold. We are limited to like 5,000 square feet from the grant. So we're designing it right at 5,000 square feet. But because of that, we really want to have the budget to give it what it needs to be. So we're focusing phase one improvements on trails, the parking, and the open space improvements. We plan to bring in some picnic tables, but leaving really, we are looking at bringing the nature nodes, the play nodes in, because they don't count as part of that formal playground, and we can do them fairly efficiently along the trails or along the edge of the open space. So that's the way to get a bit of playfulness into the park right off the bat. But the rest of it would be a combination of trails, formal lawns, and potentially informal meadows, depending on how far we can get that budget to go. One question specifically I'd like to have a little bit of feedback and discussion on is as we start to develop that budget a little bit further, there's a give and pull between formal lawn, meadow-like lawn initially and formal lawn later, and trails. I'd love to hear a little bit about any priorities from this group between putting the money into a soft surface trail and or a couple of soft surface trails versus kind of usable, irrigated, open lawn.
Commission.
Trails.
Okay.
Trails for sure.
Trails, because if I'm going to take my kids to open lawn to play, I'm probably going to take them to CCP where there's also a playground, but I can take them to walk on trails. So that's a more usable phase one space to me than just lawn.
Okay.
I agree and would also say trails with kind of the caveat, like these back trails, if they are not visible from the road, like if it feels like you're back there by yourself, then people aren't going to use them because they're going to feel unsafe. So if it's a choice between an unsafe trail that's not going to get used or clearing lawn for sightline, say trails, but with a big asterisk that we really do kind of want to think that through and where we put those trails so that people feel safe and secure using them.
Yeah, honestly, if you don't have a sight line from the road all the way back to where that trail's located, you might as well forget it, because the wrong people are going to end up back on that trail.
Okay. Great. That is exactly the feedback we were looking for.
Good.
So my last slide is really just a nod to where we're at in our process. We've had a whirlwind getting to a master plan, and the purpose of our consolidated schedule to get to this point was so that we could really spend the time doing the design documents for phase 1. We're going to expedite that as well so we can get out to bid. You can see here, we're basically going to be spending the rest of this year in phase 1 design to get through design and permitting, get out to bid next winter, which is our prime bid market, and then try and get construction completed before June of 2023. We do have a second open house. We had our kind of first was just the online survey. We have a second open house, virtual and associated online survey that we're planning in March. And so that will actually be focused less so on phase 1 improvements because we've got to proceed in order to hit our schedule. But we really want to spend that time to think about the next phase, which would be playground and shelters and what character, what types of play components are we interested in? What is this art spray feature want to be, to really get a lot more input on the quality and the character and the materials of what could be potentially the next phase of improvement. And by then we might have a little bit more to be able to offer and share with potential future acquisition as well.
Great.
And with that, I'll open it up to any other questions.
Commission, any questions, any thoughts that popped into your head as you were looking at things? Okay.
I am looking at the chat. I can't always tell exactly who's coming, but if we haven't taken a look at it yet, there is definitely another comment about bathrooms and an amazing playground similar to Covington Park, a desire to proceed with that purchase. So we have a little bit of room to expand and get some of those other features we're looking for, and another vote for trails. So
sweet.
I'll just clarify
Question.
one item too, just in the chat. I think I read that it states that we did purchase those 2 properties, and I want to be clear, we haven't purchased those 2 properties yet. We have an agreement basically for the option to purchase those. So just want to be clear that the city hasn't purchased those yet. It's kind of in process. So
Question. The land, not the land, but the sidewalk that's unfinished between the hospital and Red Robin, is that in any future plans
That road?
along Kent Kangley? Yeah.
There's supposed to be an access road around the roundabout that goes back behind the hospital up to that, but it's not been funded for years. It's just on a plan and just sits there.
Okay, what about along Kent Kangley by Red Robin? The sidewalk just kind of ends
Yeah,
there.
is that part of the upgrade, the 272nd upgrade project? I think it might be.
Yeah, and maybe Ethan, you can like address this in the good of the order at the end of the meeting, because that's
sure. Yeah, that's outside the scope of that, but I can
Yeah.
talk to that at the end of the meeting, Jeff.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments from the commission particular to Soco Park and this master plan? So,
Nope.
all right. Julia and Merritt, thank you so much for being here and for all the work that you have done. It looks really, really exciting. There's a lot to be excited about with this. It's always
Thank
fun.
you.
Stuff come to fruition. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. And if one park wasn't enough, we get to do 2 tonight. So we've got Jenkins Creek Park coming up next. So Ethan, I'll let you introduce the consultants here.
Yeah, and for this item, so this is for the Jenkins Creek Park project, which has to do with the design and development of the parcel that the city purchased last year, where the RV storage business was. Hopefully that triggers everybody's memory. And so we're working with the Watershed Company as our consultant team for this project. And we have Kyle Braun, who's just shown up on the screen, and he's joining us this evening. And really, this is an update on this project, and also just to kind of share with you a couple different options, especially in regards to how the right-of-way might work around this property. So with that, I'm going to make you co-host, Kyle.
Can everyone see me and hear me okay?
We can.
All right. Yeah, I'm Kyle Braun. I'm a landscape architect with the Watershed Company, and I've been working on Jenkins Creek Park here, and I'm hopefully can share a screen here. Okay, so if you remember a couple of years ago, the Jenkins Creek Master Plan was prepared, and so this is the overall concept. So we're focusing on right now, kind of phase 1 is what we're calling it, and it's the parking lot and entrance improvements on the southwest side of the project. So this is the concept that was prepared for the RCO grant, the trail connection, and the area next to Wax Road where that RV lot is. So this concept right here shows the park concept within the parcel boundaries. So there's actually no right-of-way improvements right here. So this concept was prepared under the assumption that we could put the right-of-way improvements on the southern parcel to the south. So based off of that, I'm not sure if you're all aware, but on the City of Covington 6-year capital improvement project, there is this street connection right here. Can you see that? Is that coming up on there? The 272nd, 180th?
I'm not sure we're seeing that screen. We're still just seeing the project site design.
Okay. Let me slide it over there.
Yeah, that's showing up now.
Okay, so this is on the City of Covington 6-year capital improvement plan, and it's actually, so our site, can you see my cursor right there?
Yes.
So our site is right here, so you can see all the RVs there. Jenkins Creek Park is right here. So this is actually a major arterial, which requires an 80-foot right-of-way improvement. So with that, I mean, based on that other concept, we would have to straddle this parcel line right here. So 40 feet on this private property and 40 feet here. So based on the concepts we're showing, we've prepared 2 alternatives. Sorry, bear with me, I'm switching back over. So option 1 and 2. So this is option 1 right here. So what this shows is if we straddle the parcel boundary. So parcel boundary is shown up in the yellow right here. Can you see my cursor?
Yes.
So parcel boundary is in the yellow, and then the white would be what would be required for right-of-way improvements for, you know, if anyone was going to develop this lot. So the actual street that CIP project I showed you would cut through here, and then we'd have 40 feet on this parcel, 40 feet on this parcel here. So basically what it does is it requires us to push our design to the north. So I'm going to switch down to option 1 here. So this is basically the concept, the RCO concept that I showed you before. Right away is pushed all the way on the multi-care property. And then this would be concept 2 where we would share the right of way. So kind of some pros and cons with those 2 concepts is really with the right of way on the multi-care property, it would require us to basically come up with an agreement, purchase the property from them, because we would be pushing that to the south, basically 40 feet. And then this one, or excuse me, this one we would share the parcel line. So a negative with this is we're actually pushing our design, the concept is going to the north there. It's getting closer to this private property here, and it actually requires some of the program elements to go into the public way, Southeast 267 right there. So really tonight, I think we're looking for kind of a recommendation on which one we would prefer. And you can jump in here, but
Yeah.
on that.
And I might just jump in too, just to add a little bit to that, Kyle, because staff did a little bit of a review of this morning, and I haven't had even a chance to debrief with Kyle yet on this. But I've some comments, and I met with our public works and community development teams in the city on this. And as Kyle brought up, if we do push the right of way on the southern side of the park property to be on the adjacent parcel, you do run into, you have to pay for it. So it does increase the cost, whereas kind of the typical practice, it would just be splitting the right of way between the two parcels. The other comment that we kind of made or we observed that when we did our review is the pedestrian access into the rest of the park is that bridge, which is at the northern section of the of what you're seeing right now. So pushing some of the park into the right of way, that's I guess Southeast 267th place, actually kind of creates a little bit more of, I don't know, provides more park at the entrance to the rest of the park. It kind of shifts everything up. And so there's some benefits to that as well. And yeah, you'd kind of be losing some of the right-of-way space on the southern end, but you might be able to use some of that right-of-way on the northern end where it's not going to be an arterial. So it kind of just shifts everything up a little bit. But we did want to share it with you to see if there was any thoughts or input from the commission. But some of this would largely be dictated from working with Public Works and even the adjacent property owner to see what they're willing to do. So.
Okay, can we probably get a little bit of clarification here? So let me just make sure that even I understand this. If we push down all the way to the property or the parcel boundary line and built from there, if this road is ever developed, the right of way required for that road will eat so far into the property here, it would take away some, like half the parking, it looks like, or the lower section of parking. Is that correct? No.
As of right now, the program elements are not reduced, so parking is not reduced in number because we're able to slide into the right of way. So from that, I mean, program elements wouldn't be reduced. It really would be impervious and green space that would be reduced.
Okay.
Again, I want to understand the right of way as well. So the city of Covington currently has a right of way on the multi-care property to expand that road?
No. So that alignment hasn't been, there's been no development right on our property or the multi-care property. And so that's when the right of way would get dedicated. So because we're developing first, there's kind of has to be some decisions that get made as far as on our property. Are we assuming that there is not going to be any right of way dedication on ours, in which case we would have to basically purchase our share of 40 feet from multi-care.
Okay.
And there, in this particular situation, really both the options we're showing you are a feasible park plan, which is actually the biggest takeaway is either one of these plans works. So that's a good place to be in. There's probably a conversation that needs to happen with multi-care, the property owner to the south, to see where they are with any plans for their site. last time I talked to them, they hadn't really done that step, and I don't know if they've done anything since then. But I think.
So we're just preserving our side in case we can come to an agreement with Multicare in the future to develop that road.
Well, we still have, I guess the one thing that kind of pushes us is we do have to figure out how as we build this parking lot, how are we going to have short-term access into the parking lot? And then also what's the long-term access? Because as you can see, the entrance and exits are going into that right of way. So we either need to build that, you could build it out fully right now, but that would be expensive, but we'll probably do some sort of interim development that would just be an entrance into the park that would later be updated as that road got built.
And there was no plan for egress or ingress from 267th?
No, I mean, that's going to be, it's a small residential street, and bringing in traffic to that area, kind of the goal is to redirect them to where an arterial will be, so that we don't start creating a busy street on a street dead end.
I guess that's the challenge is that you said where an arterial will be, but what's the probability that 185th is going to actually ever connect in to Wax Road going across Jenkins Creek there?
Well, I mean, it's part of the
long term.
The transportation CIP program. I mean, I honestly, none of us have a crystal ball to know when that'll get funded, but it is part of their traffic modeling when they do their analysis on traffic and road improvements in the city. So
it's been on there for 20 years. So, I mean, it's not been in a rush.
No, but I mean, it's similar to like 204th, right? At one point it's just an idea, but these roads do get built out and change over time. It might be a long time though. You're right.
Kyle, since this is the first time that any of the commission has seen any of these concept alternatives, can you just kind of briefly talk us through the differences between the two and any positive or negatives, things that we should consider?
Yeah. I think really, as Ethan said, I mean, from a program standpoint, we're really able to achieve everything that we've proposed in the RCO concept here. It's just a matter of square footages and where some of these elements land, whether it's on the actual park property or within the right of way. So I can flip kind of subtle differences. I mean, you can see the trails definitely push. We've got the kiosk, the restroom, some of that stuff's situated farther north. And you're just really losing some of this parcel to the south, which like as Ethan mentioned, it has to get paid for probably sooner or later. So it's either it's paid for by purchasing it from Multicare, or it's paid for by actually paying for the construction of the right-of-way improvements, which, in this case, like we'd be required sidewalks, street trees, and that would be a sidewalk down to an area over here, which if the road isn't developed for a number of years would be kind of, we're weighing costs and benefits versus now to later. So, but in terms of program elements and all that, I still think they're fairly equivalent. It's really just a matter of where we place these things on property boundaries and within the right of way, and then how some of those things are paid for with trade-offs versus construction now or purchasing property from other stakeholders.
Is it a problem on this concept alternative that the kiosk and whatever that round red thing is, the park entrance, those are technically, it looks like, outside of the parcel boundary? Is that a problem in any way, or no, because it falls into the road?
There would be right of way permitting required, but I mean, in general, the public right of way is public space, managed and owned by the city and similar to the park space. So
I can share that was discussed at the internal meeting today. And while there might be some tactics as to what makes that actually possible or permitted. It is possible. It's just might be some procedural things that we have to do to allow that to happen. Southeast 267th place obviously is never going to, that's not going to become a street that crosses the creek or goes and becomes an arterial at any point. So the flexibility with that right of way exists more so than on 180th Southeast.
So would we have to purchase right of way to the north of this parcel on Southeast 267th, or is that not an issue because it's a city road and so we already own the right of way per se?
Correct.
Okay. So is this almost like 6 of one, half a dozen of another, where if we went with this alternative that we're looking at, we would need to build out sidewalk down on the southern portion. And if we went with the other option that pushes straight up to the parcel boundary line, we don't, but we would need to purchase right of way. So it's like, do we pay for sidewalk or do we pay for right of way? Is that kind of what the choice ultimately comes down to?
Yeah, I think from a expense point of view, that's correct. I think also pushing it entirely onto the adjacent property could be challenged. You know, if that property owner that doesn't fit their vision or plans for their property, they could kind of push back and say, you know, why are we doing that? You know, we should split it. So if we split it now, there's nothing to oppose. Whereas if we try to push it to the adjacent site, I think, you know, that's a big question whether that is something that can even happen and they're willing to do.
So, okay, Parks Commission, jump in if you have any thoughts or anything that you want to add here. It seems to me how this sums up. I mean, Multicare has been a great neighbor and a great community partner. So I definitely would prefer not to do anything that puts them in any type of awkward situation. And so there's that. Even though this sidewalk isn't really going to go anywhere, based on what we have seen in the Prose Plan and the conversation that we have just had, there is a demand for sidewalks and trails. I mean, even though it's not going to go anywhere, it's still a sidewalk, I guess. It's based on kind of all of that. It seems like it makes more sense to go with this concept alternative that's in front of us.
Agreed.
Okay, yeah, Parks Commission chime in with thoughts on that.
Are you looking for a motion or what do you want?
No, I just want to make sure that people have an opportunity to share their thoughts.
And I'll kind of just add, you know, from at the staff level, what we're planning at this point too is kind of, you know, option 2, but we're still going to engage with Multicare to, you know, as you said, they've been partners with us. They've supported this vision for developing this as part of the park. So we're going to reach out to them and kind of share with them these plans and see, you know, maybe for whatever reason they'll say, no, it works better for us and this whole area to put the right of way on their property, in which case that would be good information for us to know. But we're kind of thinking we'll fall back to splitting it kind of as it is. That's kind of the staff perspective at this point.
Is there reasoning behind putting the bathroom facility so close to the creek, all the way in the back of the park, instead of being closer to the roundabout?
Kyle, you want to take that?
Sorry, what was that one?
Oh, so I'll elaborate on why I'm asking the question too. But is there reasoning why the bathroom is so far in the back of the park? I know it's closest to the trailhead, but the concern for me with that is that when we're now closing this access down for the vehicles at night, for the vandalism that we've seen previously in Covington, if we had more street visibility on it, we'd be less likely to see the vandals go in there. But again, being more accessible to the street side near the roundabout, you then have more people walking by at night.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And for this concept, I mean, we furthered the RCO concept that was prepared. So I realized that the bathroom and the kiosk locations were switched. So kind of the next step for this is once we get the recommendation, or not recommendation, but the direction from the city, which sounds like it would be the split right away. We're gonna advance our concept into what we call round two, which we're gonna analyze and study the entrances to the south. So I'll note that as a comment, and as we further advance the location of some of these design program elements, we can kind of flush that stuff out, and so you'll have another opportunity to see this.
Yeah, I love the signage up by where the proposed trail connection number is 1 on the far left. I think Ethan's having fun with a mouse cursor over there, but well, that's where I like it, is then it kind of gives that connectivity to the rest of the trail system we're trying to talk about doing as well, is the ability to then maybe give directionals to where town or where the next trailhead is. Again, for over a decade, I didn't even know that park existed because it was tucked so far back. And if we push it that far back again with the signage, it might be a challenge.
Robert, regarding the bathrooms, one thing to note is that when we have master planned out Jenkins Creek Park, there's no water access into the park. So I think part of the reason that the bathrooms were put there is that the playground is, as part of the master plan, just kind of on the other side of that bridge. And so that puts the bathrooms as close to the playground and where the kids are as possible. But I don't think we can put any bathrooms into the park without bringing in sewer and water, which is going to be very cost prohibitive. So it's kind of like, well, let's get them as close as we can without actually putting them in there. I think that was also part of the rationale behind it too. I do agree with you with the sign front and center though, or whatever signage for the park being up front so people do know it's there. Okay, commissioners, any other thoughts? Ethan, Kyle, did you get what you were hoping for from the commission in terms of information and direction?
Yeah, I think more than anything, this is really just to share with the commission as things kind of proceed and whatnot. I don't think there's really any action that's necessary. And so, yeah, Kyle, do you need anything more?
No, I think it was great to meet you all, and I imagine we'll be talking in the future. But I think, yeah, this is a good start, and we've got, I think, direction moving forward. So we should probably debrief offline and then maybe next week and touch base on next steps.
Yeah, we'll talk offline, Kyle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle.
All right, thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Okay, last item on our agenda, Parks and Rec, is the election of officers, which is always done in February to give new commissioners who onboard a chance to choose to be an officer. And I'm turning this over to Ethan because it's awkward for me to run the election for chair as the chair. It's just all sorts of weirdness there. So he is going to do that.
Okay, I was just pasting in, there was a chat comment from somebody in the public that was looking for the slide deck and whether they'll be published. And I just put the Soco Park project link in the chat. I don't know if that was the slides that they're wanting, but each different project that we've had come up tonight on their project page, we have the PowerPoint or PDF slides posted to that webpage. So let me bring up the agenda. Yeah, so elections of Parks and Recreation Commission officers. There's actually 3 different officer positions. There's the chair position, vice chair position, and secretary. The secretary position has been vacant for, I think, a couple years at least. And I've just been kind of doubling as a secretary and taking minutes. But if anybody else wants to take on that officer role, that is available. But really most key are the chair position and the vice chair position. I'll just describe them real quickly, and then we can open it up to nominations and votes. So the chair position really serves to lead the meeting like Laura has been. And also, I work with the chair to just kind of plan the meetings and prepare for these. So my main liaison with the commission. And then the chair also is the main liaison with the city council and provides the monthly reports at the city council meetings, which are on the second Tuesday of each month. And then the vice chair's role is really to just back up the chair. So if the chair can't make it to a meeting or giving a city council report, that duty would fall to the vice chair. Am I missing anything, Laura? Is that kind of?
It sums it up pretty well, so.
Okay. So with that, I think we can open up to nominations for either chair or vice chair. You can self-nominate yourself, and I think we'll just take nominations and then does the commission have a preference whether we take all the nominations at once or just take a nomination and vote? Take a nomination and vote. Let's do that.
Sure.
Any nominations for chair?
I always nominate Laura, but I don't know if she wants to continue on in that role. So the question is, does she want to continue on in that role before I make the nomination?
I will continue on in the role.
Then I make the nomination.
Let's take a quick roll call vote on that. Nomination for Laura Morrissey to be chair of the Parks and Recreation Commission. We'll start with you, Steve.
You want an aye?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I know. Since I nominated her, I think I'll vote for her as well.
Okay. And then I'm just going through my screen. It's Amy.
I'll vote for Laura.
Robert.
Aye.
Jeff.
Aye.
Jenny.
Aye.
All right. Congratulations, Laura. You're chair again.
Thank you.
And then we'll similarly take nominations for vice chair. You can nominate yourself. You don't have to be shy. I think a lot of people just don't know who's willing, so feel free to nominate.
Yeah, that's kind. I mean, let's put it this way: would anybody like to volunteer for this role?
I mean, I've done it, so I can tell to other people it's really not much of a role because you're only doing it when Laura is not available, and she's usually available.
Robert, would you be willing to consider taking this on?
I have a couple of concerns with taking it on. The main one is just the amount of travel that I have to do for work. It becomes an issue, but the council meetings are on Tuesdays.
Correct.
Yes.
If you need somebody to fill the role, then I can take it on. I can't say that I could necessarily make the extreme long-term commitment to it for years and years on the commission. So if I take it on, Amy or Jenny or Jeff or somebody else is going to have to be ready to step up, and we always have another open positions that's coming in. So Laura, if you need me, I can be there and take care of any challenges.
Would you
I prefer that better than taking notes as secretary.
If Robert can't make it, then I'll step up and do it as a backup if you really get that desperate.
Would you be willing to give it a try for a year, Robert?
You got it. If there's some that comes up, I'll let you know.
Okay. That's all we ask.
All right, let's take a vote. Let's just everybody raise your hand if you're in favor of Robert being vice chair. Okay, that works. And I'll just
remember
add,
those votes.
I think the commission's always been good. If the chair and vice chair can't say make a report, then we kind of just go down the list and other commissioners usually step up and help give that report. So
I think that's happened like maybe twice the whole time I've been on the commission.
it's rare, but the commission's good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's I'll make a note of that and let the city clerk know. Next item, staff report. I'll just roll into that. Really, I'm gonna mostly skip the staff report. It's just been a very full agenda and whatnot. I haven't put together the monthly report yet. I do still plan on doing that and getting that out to you just via email in the next week or so. I was going to report that we did have a purchase and sale agreement executed for those 2 properties, but we've already told you that. So that's all I have.
Did you want to address Jeff's question about the sidewalks?
Thank you. Yeah. So Jeff, I think your question had to do with Kent Kangley and was the project for road improvements and pedestrian improvements still going to happen, or what's the status with that project?
Yes.
And as the Parks and Recreation Director, there's an asterisk when I give this information because I don't have the exact details, but the project, to my knowledge, is still happening. It actually went out to bid for construction last fall, but they didn't receive any bids that weren't over the budget for that project. So they're rebidding it this year. In fact, I think we're probably approaching the time period that they're rebidding it if it isn't already out for bid. So it is still planned to move forward, and that would be a bridge that would go over Jenkins Creek and basically connect the improvements that you see kind of along Home Depot all the way to the intersection with Wax Road. And that's all I have for my staff report.
Cool. Next meeting's agenda, we've got 4 items on the agenda. The next meeting is Wednesday, March 16th. Parks and Rec Department performance report, action plan, tree board work plan, and then commission work plan. It'll very likely be, well, it will be a shorter meeting than this one. Back to our normal start time too of 6 o'clock. So, and then good of the order. Anybody have anything they want to share for good of the order?
Nope.
Yep. Okay. So, thank you guys for being here. Members of the public, thank you for being here.
One quick one.
Yeah.
I was trying to type real quickly for the
Oh, sorry.
chat, but if I can interrupt
do.
real quickly, there was a question about access to the recording for tonight's meeting, and maybe I could just share for those that are still on the call that we do have a recording for it. I'm not sure yet where it will be posted because this is the first Parks and Rec Commission meeting that we've recorded through Zoom. So I'm not sure if it'll be posted on the Parks and Rec Commission part of the website or on one of the project's web pages, but you can email me if you can't find it in the next couple of days, and I will be able to share that with you. So, and my contact information is available on the city website. Ethan Newton, the Parks Director.
Great. Thank you. Okay. We actually did really well tonight. I am going to declare us adjourned at 7:54, and everybody have a good night. Thanks for all of your thoughts and comments and participation.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
Good night.
Good night.